Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where a number of you have been asking me, Grace, who won Comic-Con? Now, I already gave my verdict in my shot-by-shot review of the Justice League trailer that debuted at Comic-Con, and I feel that hands down, not just DC won Comic-Con, but Warner Brothers overall as a studio, with their shock and awe raining of trailers on Saturday afternoon on the East Coast, Saturday morning on the West Coast. They had both a quantity and quality, and they really didn't give Marvel any room to make headlines. Now, some people have tried to argue the opposite, but a number of you, but the first to send to me was Ben Tyndall, BTT viewer Ben Tyndall, sent me Variety's article ranking the social media traffic for movies out of Comic-Con. So you can see from this list that clearly Warner Brothers did win. DC in particular, but all the Warner Brothers movies were up there higher than what Marvel debuted. So as you can see, Suicide Squad, number one, because not only did they have a nice presence at Comic-Con, but they've really just been pushing these character-specific trailers over the past few days. My only concern about Suicide Squad is that their ad campaign could peak too early. It almost feels like it's coming out this weekend, but we really, in fact, have 2 weeks to go. Star Trek Beyond, though, although that Star Trek Beyond being at number 2 kind of is like, what's this list mean then? Because, of course, the movie didn't do spectacular at the box office. It didn't bomb, but it certainly was, this traffic would have maybe made you feel that it would have done a little bit better. But Wonder Woman, I thought it was interesting that Wonder Woman was higher than Justice League, so that's very encouraging. Everyone's got their fingers crossed that a movie with a female lead can perform well and on par with what male lead films do at the box office. That's a really important part of the Wonder Woman test. Lights Out, that did very, very well at the box office, $21 million off of a $5 million budget. Fantastic Beasts, man, that needed to register. And then Kong Skull Island did very well, which I actually think, I'm going to do a shot-by-shot on that later this week and for Doctor Strange, but I think Kong Skull Island perhaps was actually the best trailer artistically to come out of the convention. Then you can see that Marvel is hovering down there toward the bottom, and I'm impressed, by the way, that Moana, with a very small panel, not in one of the big rooms, was able to also make a dent. But that's partially, I think, because of that great international trailer that was released right before Comic-Con started. So Disney did get on the map, but I also think, to be fair to Marvel and Disney, well, Marvel, because Disney overall didn't have a huge presence. Marvel didn't really play, right? And that's a really important distinction to make. Marvel did not release things to the public, except for a new Doctor Strange trailer. But it wasn't an amazing trailer, and also we'd already seen Doctor Strange. So they should have, I think that Thor Ragnarok, by the way, if they had released the Thor Ragnarok comedic short about what Thor and Hulk were doing during Civil War, they would have been much higher on this list. So this was a choice made by Marvel. And, I'm glad that they do something for their fans and for the people who sit in Hall H, but that's not what Comic-Con is about. Comic-Con is about getting those headlines. It's about, not everyone can go to San Diego, both, in terms of feasibility and also in terms of finances. So they should, and maybe at some point they will release it. And when they do, they will trend like crazy. Kevin Feige is very smart. And, I think this wasn't a smart thing to do. I think he shouldn't have gone to Comic-Con if he wasn't going to compete. But then again, he had no idea that Warner Brothers was going to come down so hard. So he knows now. And as I've said before, I don't think that Marvel will probably return to Comic-Con. If I were them, I would not. It's just, they don't need it. They make their own headlines all the time. They have D20. They won't be there next year because of D23 anyway. But even on the off years, they should just hold their own event. They totally can do it. And like that press conference they did when they announced Phase 3. That's what I would do if I were Kevin Feige. I'd be like, so long, Comic-Con. Let Warner Brothers have you. But in TV, they did better, and I'm sure that Netflix will never leave. Luke Cage, as you can see here, had a really nice showing. I was very happy for that. It starts in September, and I think it's in a very good position to do well. So that's who won Comic-Con, and it's Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers totally deserves it. And for those of you who are diehard Disney Marvel fans, come on, let's have some friendly competition. You should just let Warner Brothers enjoy their solid win for once, their decisive win, and rest assured, Marvel has a lot of other wins that they can settle back on, including at the box office. All right, so speaking of DC, the second story of the day is that David Ayer is promoting Suicide Squad, part of this huge push. I'm glad that they include the filmmakers in that. And I liked again that DC brought out all their directors at once at the beginning of their panel at Comic-Con. I thought that was a really nice thing to do. But David Ayer said, stop saying that Jason Todd is the Joker. He's not the Joker. He's never going to be the Joker. Now, of course, some people will say David Ayer is just trying to throw us off, right? Because there was that evidence that where the bullet holes or the pinholes or the wounds in the Joker costume were match-up wounds on Jared Leto's Joker. I don't think Jared. I mean, to be honest, I never believed this theory. I don't think that Jared Leto would sign on to be not the Joker. And this reminds me a lot of the Lex Luthor is not. Jesse Eisenberg is Lex Luthor's son, and we can hold out hope that the Lex Luthor we want to show up will. And as I've pointed out, Lex Luthor has always been a junior, so that's nothing new. For better or worse, Jesse Eisenberg is your Lex Luthor, and Jared Leto is your Joker. I really like what they're doing with the Joker, quite frankly. Let's see how it looks, in the final product. But so far, while I think it was a real shock to the system to see how much they changed it, I think they, again, were very smart to debut it so early, and I think that I've come around quite a bit to this very modern version of the Joker. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really good, and we already saw a bunch of people cosplaying as the character at Comic-Con, and I think they did a really nice job, to the point that it almost makes the old Joker seem a little dated, right? Just not as fresh. So I think really, really fascinating. But so anyway, not Jason Todd. Then the third story of the day is Ava DuVernay's A Wrinkle in Time at Disney, which is moving ahead very quickly, which is good because I'm very excited to see Ava DuVernay return to the director's chair for a movie. She's been working on TV on Oprah Winfrey's network, and Oprah Winfrey is actually who we're talking about today. But anyway, back to Ava DuVernay. She kind of, after everyone felt she should have been nominated for an Oscar for Best Director for Selma, she kind of became more of a Hollywood activist than a Hollywood talent, which I found very frustrating. She walked away from Black Panther. Although thankfully Ryan Coogler ended up getting the gig. But now she has this very nice consolation prize, which is A Wrinkle in Time over at Disney. If you haven't seen Selma, go watch Selma. It's really, really good. I know sometimes you might be like, I've seen a lot of civil rights movies. Sometimes you can see feel like you've seen a lot of, especially with the backlash against SJWs these days. You might feel you don't want to watch Selma. But I think it's important. I think that Selma is not only a very well-made movie, but I think that it's the best look I've seen inside the mind of Martin Luther King Jr. and why he operated the way he did and why he was successful where other civil rights leaders have not been. Back also, not only back during the time of Martin Luther King Jr., but even today. I think that everyone who's into civil rights should watch Selma to see oh, that's what I'm doing wrong, which in short is, working within the system because the system isn't going anywhere. So if you want to succeed, you have to operate according to the rules that have already been set. So anyway, A Wrinkle in Time, as I said when Ava DuVernay was hired, and Jennifer Lee, the co-director, writer of Frozen, is scripting, I said that I suspect that Ava DuVernay would really diversify the cast of that famous novel. Now, I haven't read A Wrinkle in Time in a very long time. I barely remember the story, but when I was looking into it for this coverage, it reminded me a lot of Stranger Things. And also, get this, it involves a Tesseract. Will we have a crossover with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Basically, this young girl is searching for her missing father, who's a government scientist who was working on a mystery project which involved a Tesseract. And it's 3 kids, Meg, Charles, and Calvin, and 2 of those kids, the 2 boys, have telepathy. And then they go to this other alternate dimension to search for her father. And there are 3 kind of like witches, the W's, Mrs. What's-It, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch. Not like a witch, like a ha-ha-ha, but like, which do you want? But they do a play on that with her appearance sometimes. But that role is mostly voiceover, at least in the book, and then she appears dressed as a witch like once or twice. But anyway, Oprah Winfrey has been cast in that role of Mrs. Witch, the most prominent of the W's, right? So I think that's great, but I don't think that you should expect Ava DuVernay to stop there with diversity. I think you're going to see one of those 3 kids, Meg, Charles, or Calvin, be a different ethnicity than white, as they were in the novel. I don't know who it'll be. I think that for Meg, I'm not sure. I actually would cast Una Lawrence as Meg. Una Lawrence made her debut, she really broke onto the scene in entertainment through Matilda. Fabulous musical that originated on the West End in London and then came to the United States on Broadway. So good. But she's then made to jump to movies. I actually got to see her in Matilda. They rotated out the kids, but I got to see her, and she was great. So she was in Southpaw with Jake Gyllenhaal, very good in that movie. She's also in Bad Moms, which comes out this weekend, and also the upcoming Pete's Dragon. So she already has a relationship with Disney. She'd be a perfect Meg. But I'll be curious to see how this project comes together. It's going to be tricky. I think Ava DuVernay, of course, has to stay true to what she believes in, which is diversification in Hollywood, which I think most of us believe is important. But she doesn't want, I don't think she wants tokenism or SJW-ness to overtake the film. That's really, really important. It has to seem like a movie first that just happens to be diverse. So we'll see. I think she's off to a good start. Who doesn't love Oprah? Oprah is actually a pretty darn good actress in my opinion. I thought in The Butler she was really, really good. And she's also very active behind the scenes. She was a producer on Selma as well as appeared in the film. And I think she'll do a lot to push A Wrinkle in Time as well. So anyway, those are the three stories of the day. And the viewer question comes from Dancing Dog 60. And Dancing Dog 60 says, "Hey Grace, Dancing Dog here. I'm definitely excited about Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. Great choice in my opinion. But question, because on Monday I was saying that I was not crazy about the choice, but I reserve the right to change my mind, as hopefully we all will. But anyway, Dancing Dog says, do you think that Marvel will introduce Shang-Chi into the MCU? I think of diversity and the upcoming Black Panther film, and honestly, there is a lack of Asian characters in the films. I love the show as always. Double D for Dancing Dog. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Great question. I think that, there's a big push for finally Asian talent on camera, largely thanks to George Takei, and what he said based on the Oscars when Chris Rock made that unfortunate joke. Now, as we've talked about before, Asian talent behind the camera is on fire. John Chu, Justin Lin, James Wan, Jennifer Yu Nelson is going from animation, the Kung Fu Panda movies, to live action. Very exciting, but let's get some actors in there, right? Mantis, as far as, and also, superhero movies is a great place to do it, right? So anyway, Mantis is going to be in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Don't forget that. So that's going to be a pretty big deal. And of course, the MCU had the opportunity with the Mandarin, but that didn't work out because they wanted to do big business in China and they didn't want their villain to be Asian. So anyway, hopefully they'll fix that Mandarin situation some point in the future. And they have hinted at it because they made that short with Ben Kingsley. But anyway, unfortunately, a lot of the great Asian Marvel characters are with the X-Men franchise, so they can't use them, spinning largely out of Logan, aka Wolverine's experiences. But then also they're in the Marvel Knights series, which is currently on Netflix. So you're not going to see those characters probably in the movies. However, there are some, my two choices. One is Amadeus Cho from the Hulk universe. I think he's a great character. He's currently the Hulk in the comics. I would consider him. He's like, a boy genius. But somebody who I actually think is legitimately coming is Nico Minoru. Now, we just talked about her recently when I was talking about the Doctor Strange poster released at Comic-Con in the prequel comic. They plant the seeds for Nico to show up, and also Jericho Drum, Dr. Voodoo, Brother Voodoo, who was Dr. Voodoo when he was the Sorcerer Supreme. But anyway, Jericho Drum and Nico Minoru are hinted at by having their relatives already be part of the Masters of the Mystic Arts. I'll put a link to that video where I discussed that in the video description at the end of this video. But anyway, Nico Minoru is not only hinted at in the prequel comic, but they've actually just released an action figure for her along with some Doctor Strange action figures from Marvel Knights. Now, that doesn't necessarily say she's going to show up in this Doctor Strange movie, but she's definitely, I think that means on the MCU's radar. So I think you'll probably see Nico show up before anyone else, which would be very, very exciting. An unusual push behind the character. She's in the A-Force comic. I think that they've really decided, of all the runaways, she's the one that they've really, kept an eye on, and so they must have plans for her. So that's very exciting. So Dancing Dog, I think you will see some opportunities for Asian talent in the near future, and you already have Palm Clemente off in the Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So, but also I think Asian women have a little bit of a better chance than Asian men, unfortunately. Also, you have, of course, Wong. Now that come to think of it, Benedict Wong is in the Doctor Strange movie, but I can see what you're talking about. I'm sure that you want someone a little bit cooler than his character looks so far, right? We want a kick-ass Asian Marvel character, and they certainly exist in the comics, so why not on the big screen? So we'll see what happens, but, I think Nico Minoru, my money's on her. there being the first really big deal. So anyway, that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and that viewer question, anything you'd like us to cover tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.